In a world of 350 billion movie podcasts, two chumps have decided that now is the time for cult movies to engage in combat. Disagreements will be had, blood may be spilled, and voiceover artists most definitely will not be paid. This is Cult Film Face-Off.
Hello and welcome to Cult Film Face-Off, episode 30. With me, as always, is Chet Roivas.
Yo.
And I am Nick Leonard. In this episode, we will be looking at two cult film behemoths from director Sam Raimi. We are, of course, talking about Evil Dead versus Evil Dead 2. So let's kick off with the series started. 5 college students are spending a vacation in a remote cabin. They uncover an ancient book which unlocks an evil of epic proportions, the Evil Dead.
I have seen the dark shadows moving in the woods, and I have no doubt that whatever I have resurrected through this book is sure to come calling for me.
So, Evil Dead. I mean, obviously you've seen it. When have you last seen it? What's your...
I saw it first when I was 11 years old when I went to a friend's house and he cancelled his party plans and what he decided he wanted to do was have all of his friends go to the video shop, pick a couple of videos, come back and we'd all watch videos. We got Evil Dead and Prison by Rennie Harlin, the horror film, which I still haven't seen to this day.
Never seen it. What? No. You never got past the first film?
No, we watched the Evil Dead
3 times.
No, we watched the Evil Dead, and then at the second that film finished, a room full of 11-year-olds jumped off the couch and said, we have to go to the video shop and get Evil Dead 2, because the guy at the video shop was trying to say you need both, and we were like, no, let's get Evil Dead in the prison. So we went all the way back and we got Evil Dead 2 and watched it straight after.
Sage advice, video club.
Exactly right. So yeah, I saw it at age 11 and I've seen it, I mean, I don't even want to estimate how many times since then. What about you?
There are certain things in life which you take a punt on and they really come through, and I've done it with a couple of things that spring to memory. I did it with Wu-Tang, Enter the 36 Chambers. I did it with a Commodore 64 game called American Ninja versus the Bad Guys.
Oh, yeah.
And I did it with Evil Dead, which was on a forefront video release from Woolworths on Uckfield High Street when I was 14 years of age.
Okay.
I bought it on just the strength of the artwork alone.
Well, you hadn't heard of Evil Dead at that point. How old were you?
14.
Oh, okay. All right.
The only thing I'd seen about or heard about Evil Dead was Alex Cox mentioning it in an episode of Videodrome, and he showed the artwork of Evil Dead.
Was Alex Cox in the David Cronenberg film Videodrome?
That's a Videodrome.
Movie-drome, yeah.
That's a Videodrome.
Yeah, it's fine. Movie-drome, it's fine.
Movie-drome.
Go on.
Yeah, I heard it mentioned in Movie-drome. Yeah, bought it on VHS in Woolworths and took it back home and got a mate round and we watched it. And then he came round a couple of days later and we watched it again and I was absolutely blown away by it. I'd never seen anything like it as a kid and yeah, absolutely loved it. And I have watched it numerous times from then until now.
When was the last time?
A long time ago.
I was trying to work out when the last time I actually sat down and watched the first Evil Dead. I
couldn't fucking work it out.
Yeah, it's a long time ago.
It's pre-university. I didn't re-watch Evil Dead at university, so it's a long time ago.
Yeah.
So what do you think about rewatching it now in 2017?
The first Evil Dead is a film that I admire greatly, but I don't know if I ever quite loved it as much as I did the first time I saw it. But it's a really lean film, and you have to admire it. I mean, I think there's some ominous foreshadowing a few seconds into the film when the car steers out of control. That's seconds into the film. So the film starts straight away, and essentially it doesn't really stop from then on. There's so little nonsense in this film that I just think you have to have some, even if you hate horror films, you have to have some kind of admiration for how relentless it is and how it just wants to deliver what people who are there to see it want.
Sam Raimi is just an amazing manipulator. I mean, not a manipulator, but you're absolutely in that world, and he is controlling it through fantastic punctuation of music and visual moments. He's such a great director in doing that. There's so many well done, inventive POVs in this film. I mean, behind the clock pendulum, brilliant. Sound effects are really inventive in this as well.
Inventive is the word, really, isn't it? I mean, this is a really, really impressively inventive film.
And considering how young Raimi was, Raimi in his early 20s on a budget of $350,000. It is amazing what he has pulled off with such a meagre budget and with such little experience in shooting film.
I don't know. I mean, I feel like Evil Dead is so easy to respect. It's so easy to respect, but I think it's slightly less easy to recommend because films that are this blunt, this entirely devoted to atmosphere and shocks, films like that never age brilliantly anyway. I mean, unless you're talking about Halloween, which is one of the greatest films of all time. I think films that are relentlessly devoted to sort of... There's a phrase, I think Roger Corman used it. It might have been another horror filmmaker of some renown. They said, it's a wheel 'em in, drag 'em out movie. Which is you wheel them in, you drag them out because they're so fucking bombarded by... they're completely fucked up. I think that's a perfect description of what the kind of movie that this is. It does have some wonderful imagery in it. The image of their friend, their possessed friend, in the corner, locked underneath those floorboards, banging, trying to get out. I mean, that's a chilling... It's even today. It's a really chilling, nasty... Really, just cackling at them.
And it was chilling when my 14-year-old self watching that. It's hard to watch.
Yeah, but it's so nightmarish as well. Your friend was your friend, and 5 minutes later, they're essentially a demon in the corner of the room, bouncing out of the... I mean, it's really... That's brilliantly nightmarish, that bit. And I think it utilises the malevolence of laughter. It's an unnerving film. There's so much laughter in it. Even when it's doing pretty standard horror movie stuff, you can't relax. There's even when it's funny, it's full on. You can't. It's a film where you can't just take a breather.
That's the whole point, though, isn't it?
It's really intense.
That's the whole point. It is intense, and everything is orchestrated to elevate that intensiveness of it. The sound, the visuals, the cutting, the stop motion at the end has not aged very well.
There's also that weird bit where there's couscous coming out of a sleeve. Yeah. You're like, whoa, horrific.
But great when there's blood on the projector, which drenched the whole screen into red. Is fucking great.
Yeah.
This is the thing about Evil Dead. Comparing Evil Dead and Evil Dead 2. I mean, you've got the whole debate that goes on with, is Evil Dead 2 a remake? Is it a reimagining? Is it a sequel? I mean, you can't get away from the... I mean, how do you feel about Evil Dead 1 and Evil Dead 2?
Well, let's wait before we talk about Evil Dead 2. I mean, Evil Dead 1 is... One of the things I was impressed by watching it this time was Bruce Campbell's reaction shots are just funny. Even in a film that's supposed to be a straight down the line horror film, Bruce Campbell's reaction shots are just funny, and it seems really, really ingenious. They've taken essentially one of the best things in the first film and made it work in the second film, which is... if you look at this...
But they're giving him more... They've done what all good sequels should do, which is give the main ingredient way more screen time and amp everything up.
But if they looked at the first film and said, how can we harness the best aspects of this film? You would take how funny Ash was inadvertently in those scenes. I mean...
Give Ash more screen time.
Yeah, but also... I'm not entirely sure that they set out to make it as because it is funny. The first,
but it's unintentionally funny. This is interesting, right? Because watching it back then, it was a straight horror film. I didn't see any comedy in it at 14 years of age. There's nothing I laughed at when I was 14.
I think Bruce Campbell works against it as a horror film, and the fact that they took that element and decided to expand upon it in the sequel shows that they knew what was working.
But when you were a kid and you saw it, did you find anything?
No, I didn't. This is stuff that I was looking at now, and I was like, wow.
There is funny stuff in there, though. I mean, Bruce Campbell. You're looking at Bruce Campbell. You're magnifying. You've got him under the magnifying glass because you know what happens in terms of the series and in terms of in pop culture. It's not just the Evil Dead series. It's comics. It's computer games.
But there are plenty of moments in this film where it kind of shows where the sequels were going and where the series were going. Because when Ash lops his girlfriend's head off, and the neck basically chunders claret all over his face. I mean, it's really funny. It's broadly funny. One thing that I was thinking about is if the sequels didn't exist, would people still be talking about The Evil Dead? Would this still be a cult film? Because I feel like without the second one, and to a lesser degree the third one, the first one, as much as I admired it, I don't even know if we'd be talking about it.
But the second one builds upon everything the first one set up.
But this is what I mean. If all that existed was The Evil Dead, would we even be here now? I don't know. I
still think it's a film that massively jumps off the ban list, like massively jumps off that ban list as a film of quality that elevates itself well above 98% of those titles.
I totally agree with that for sure. And the thing is, horror movies made on this scale, they almost never. Not only do they not work, they don't work at all. Films made on this budget, in one location, they don't work. They flat out don't work. And if you even look at the other films that came out in 1981 when this came out, if you look at like My Bloody Valentine or Friday the 13th Part 2, The Burning, I mean, this is a bad comparison because they're straight down the line slasher films, and this isn't that. The Evil Dead is a bombardment of shocks and surprises with almost zero plot. There is almost zero plot in this film. But yet, films like that obviously don't age very well, but you can still...
But I tell you what, talking about the certain elements that haven't aged very well, the tree rape still hits hard. It's still... it's amazing how they did... I keep... I hold back to a $350,000 budget, and that must have taken a long time to film that sequence.
I'm sure, but it's also weird that there's that weird 15-20 second stretch where she seems to be aroused and enjoying it, where you just think, oh, why did they don't do that?
Well, that's the classic exploitation angle.
Yeah, you kind of wish that section wasn't in there. Ironically, I think that the cut down version that the BBFC, the first cut version of The Evil Dead that was released post the Video Nasty era, I think they showed this sort of titillation of her being aroused, and then they cut the rest of the stuff with these vines. I don't know. It seemed like they'd cut the wrong things. I mean, in a way, it's kind of futile talking about this because I've seen this so many times, and I can testify about how hard-hitting and how impressive this film was when I first saw it.
As a kid, there was no reference point. This is, I'll go into this in Evil Dead 2, but it's without Evil Dead 1 and Evil Dead 2, and Evil Dead 2 explicitly, there is a host of films, that are absolutely indebted to this pair of films. Watching it for the first couple of times, you go, well, I've never seen anything like this.
Yeah.
I think the thing is that you have to preempt with showing somebody this who's never seen this by giving them an idea of how much effect it's had on.
It's all very well and good saying, hey, a million people think this is great. If you just sit them down and say, enjoy this experience.
It depends who that's going to be. Who you're skewing that to. Somebody who's already has interest.
No, but I'm not. But forget about.
When an alien from a planet lands and goes, would you be interested in watching Evil Dead?
Well, anybody. Does it succeed as a film? Does it succeed?
Well, we are two people with a long-standing relationship with this film, right? So it's very hard for you and I to be objective, isn't it?
I agree with that, but that's what I was sitting back and watching this film saying, because the film is, after it sets it up, it is basically Ash getting fucked over and tormented by these demons. It's a really... Is
that not entertaining?
It is entertaining, but the fact that so much of it is supposed to be shocking and or surprising meant that as somebody who'd seen it so many times, I didn't know. And I was thinking, if somebody had never seen this, film has progressed so much that if you showed this to like a 10-year-old, 10.
Well, how did you feel when you saw the Blob, the original Blob?
The original, I don't think, the Steve McQueen one? I don't think I've ever seen that. Have you? Is it rubbish? Oh, it is. Okay.
No, I haven't. I've seen bits of it, and obviously, as a kid, I was like, well, I'm not even going to go there because it looks so outdated and old. It's kind of like, well, is this kind of what we're looking at with Evil Dead?
That's what I mean. It's like,
were you surprised at how old it looked? Because I did feel like, fuck me, I almost felt like I was watching a Roger Corman film. Like, you look at something that's very old-fashioned, very, very old. It's like, fuck, it looks really old.
It's hard for us to assess because we've seen it many times. But if you were to put that in front of somebody young,
maybe it'd be very unpalatable.
And also maybe they've seen all that stuff done better in subsequent films. It's difficult. So I am not as convinced that this stands up well as its sequel maybe does or maybe doesn't. But
it hasn't aged as well as its sequel.
Well, we'll see.
I'm saying no, it hasn't.
Spoiler it.
Because there's one thing we don't do on this podcast is spoil.
True, yeah.
So onto its sequel, prequel, came out in 1987, Evil Dead 2. Ash Williams and his sweetheart Linda travel to a secluded cabin in the woods. They mistakenly unleash an unrelenting evil force, which is hell-bent on making sure that they will be dead by dawn. Evil Dead 2.
4 years ago, in this quiet forest, in this cozy cabin, something happened. Something so frightening. Something so deadly. Something so evil. We prayed it would never happen again. Now, from the creator of Evil Dead comes Evil Dead 2. Dead 2, Dead by Dawn.
So, we've obviously both seen Evil Dead 2.
Yes.
We don't need to do that.
Yeah.
You first saw it when you were with...
Immediately after 11 years old. Yeah,
so what was the reaction when Evil Dead 2 played out?
Uproarious laughter. I mean, I think I must have... That is a contender for the most watched film. I think probably because
you've seen it more than any other film you've ever seen.
I wouldn't go that far, but it's up there. It's up there in the upper echelons because my friends and I thought it was one of the funniest films ever made. So we used to rewatch it. So yeah, I've seen this film quite a number of times in my life.
I've seen Evil Dead 2 way more than Evil Dead 1.
Oh yeah, me too. But by a million miles.
Yeah, a million miles. Yeah, I saw it. I didn't have it in quick succession at all. There was definitely some lag time between me seeing Evil Dead 1 and Evil Dead 2. And a friend of mine who I saw Evil Dead 1 with, who lived in a small village I was in at that time in my life, he got Evil Dead 2. We went to his place and watched Evil Dead 2. And proceeded to go around his place and watch Evil Dead 2 many times.
Yeah.
It's a fantastic movie. I was so looking forward to seeing it. It's inventive, it's energetic, it's attention grabbing. It is a complete ride. It is a ride. Campbell is just Bruce Campbell quite simply is a master of slapstick comedy. I mean, what he does with the hand, how his physicality is with that hand.
His expressions are permanently funny. He is a totally unique screen presence. I mean, genuinely unique. I mean, I don't know if we'd still be talking about these films if it wasn't for him.
Without him.
I really don't know if we would. Because he has found...
You need all of this amazing technical craft that Raimi creates, and you need to anchor it onto somebody, and it's anchored onto Campbell magnificently.
But Bruce Campbell has found the exact point before extraordinary overacting becomes nauseating. I mean, like, he's just below the point where, like a kid's TV performer, where it starts to become nauseating. He's just on the edge of overacting just a little bit too much. He does actually have conviction. That's the weird thing. He maintains conviction, and that's why it works.
He has integrity of what he's doing.
Yeah,
he never plays it. He doesn't play it for laughs.
That's what I mean. He's just on that edge. He overacts something chronic.
And also, his actual look is that he's actually a very good-looking guy, but his chin is slightly too big. So he's got this perfect look as well.
Yeah. That's true.
These slightly overemphasized features that fit that role perfectly.
And the other thing I don't understand is, why are Ash's one-liners so perfect? Because Ash's one-liners are rubbish. You're going down. I mean, that's
he delivers them.
But he delivers it like Shakespeare. Who's laughing now? I mean, all of his one-liners. You expect
groovy. I mean, groovy. Anybody else said groovy, it would come off as it's like
the camera always goes in like, here comes the big one-liner. Yeah, groovy. You're going down. They are so shit. But Bruce Campbell thinks that they're zingers. The film constantly says "vroom" in all of the Evil Dead. Here comes the one-liner, and Bruce Campbell, with utter conviction, says a line of dialogue that's patently dog shit, and that is part of why it's so brilliant. Because if somebody says a line of dialogue that's lame, it's lame. But when Bruce Campbell delivers it, you just think, you know what? There's something so brilliant about the fact that character thinks that it's...
And poignant. And also the way that... The thing is, it's a perfect marriage between a character actor and a director, because Raimi has got his muse, and he'll cut shots and zoom in really quick for him to deliver that line.
And again...
So it's a concoction of,
I totally agree.
But a concoction of behind the camera and in front of the camera that is married perfectly.
Is it scary? I think that there are images.
It's fleetingly scary. It's not. I mean, Evil Dead 1 is played far more for shocks, and Evil Dead 2 is played far more.
I think again, Evil Dead 1, there are little bits that you pick out as being sort of chilling, but I think this is the same. I mean, him strangling himself in the mirror is a little bit like, I was like, oh, that's quite a startling image when he jumps out of it at himself in the mirror and strangles himself. And that demonic...
the cabin laughing at him is so good.
And also the
cabin when all
the lamps...
That's not scary. It's the highest point of humour in the film for me. I loved that when that came around.
When they all
laughing at him. It's so harsh. He's having such a harsh time.
But that's one of the brilliant things about the first film, is that he's constantly being laughed at. I think that's one of the strengths of the first film as a horror film.
So many films are indebted to Evil Dead 2.
It's untrue.
I mean, so many films.
Yeah.
I mean, I was thinking about this while watching the film, and I was thinking you certainly wouldn't have Cabin in the Woods, which is so directly kind of influenced by it, but like Dead Snow, Tucker and Dale versus Evil, Shaun of the Dead, without, Brain Dead. I mean, we talked about this when we had the episode with Brain Dead, and now watching Evil Dead 2 again, and we both said, oh, do you know what? maybe this usurps Evil Dead 2. How do you feel about those two films?
Brain Dead's a better film than Evil Dead 2.
I agree.
But
I agree. Brain Dead is so funny.
Because
Brain Dead has got way more gags than Evil Dead 2.
But it's not just that. It's as if Peter Jackson said, "Oh, great, they're onto something here," and he took
and it did his thing with it.
Yeah, I mean, I
never thought, if you asked me before we started doing this podcast, I would go, what?
Yeah.
Evil Dead 2.
Yeah.
Brain Dead is the better film.
If you're a fan of Evil Dead 2 and you have not seen Peter Jackson's Brain Dead, I implore you to do that, because
I watched it. I really enjoyed watching Evil Dead 2, but I got so much enjoyment of Brain Dead.
Brain Dead, my sides were hurt.
I actually think Brain Dead is in my top 10 films.
It is.
It's a masterpiece.
It is a masterpiece.
Actually, a masterpiece.
But at the same time, it could not have existed without Evil Dead 2. That's the problem.
It's indebted to Evil Dead
So
2.
deeply, yeah.
Have you seen Within the Woods?
No, I don't think I have.
So Within the Woods is the 30-minute short film that came before Evil Dead.
Is that available to watch?
I don't know. I saw it on the IMDb that in Raimi's credits.
Maybe it's like A Fistful of Fingers, the Edgar Wright film they talk about it a lot, but it's not readily available to watch.
So, did we get some correspondence this
We
episode?
did, yeah. So if ever you've got anything you want to say, check out our blog, cultfilmfaceoff.com/blog. And yeah, we'll read out your stuff before we make our verdicts. So, okay. Tom Shin says, the Evil Dead films are fine, but I've never truly understood the love for the second one. It is essentially a Three Stooges film, and everyone hates the Three Stooges. I don't think I've ever seen a Three Stooges film from beginning to end.
I've never seen a 3D film from beginning to end, but I have played the computer game.
There was a computer game?
Yeah.
What, the Three Stooges? On what format was it?
It wasn't a BBC Micro, it was like an IBM, but it's a very solid game where you are the Three Stooges, there's pie fights, there's interactive pie fights, and you have to raise money for the orphanage.
But what is it, a beat 'em up?
But there is a computer game that is solid. I'm telling you, I've never seen Three Stooges the whole of the film, but the computer game was on it.
But what is it? It's a scrolling beat 'em up, right?
I think there's far more to it than that. I think it was before point and clicks became really popular.
Oh right,
It was kind of like Monkey Island before Monkey Island. I love Monkey Island. It wasn't Monkey Island, but it was all right when you're 11.
Okay.
So David Turners,
yeah,
not Turners. David Turners. So that tree rape scene in Evil Dead was weird, wasn't it? And I don't mean this is outrageous. How could they do this? That argument doesn't fly with Evil Dead. Everything is off the charts. I just mean, like, who sat down and thought, okay, then she gets raped by a tree, and then who said, yeah. And then they cast the part and was like, okay, so there's a scene, we get raped by a tree, and the actress was all like, okay, that's normal. And then the cast and crew were setting up for that scene, just doing their jobs, and that, this wasn't a completely batshit mental idea. Then during filming, people are pushing branches all over her and that. Then when they finish shooting, they just sit about chatting like it is normal. It's weird. Craig Edwards, my buddy and I went to see The Evil Dead at the Starlight Drive-In in El Dorado, Illinois, in the summer of 1983. It took that long to make it to our neck of the woods.
Can I just say, I would really have loved to have seen The Evil Dead in El Dorado, Illinois.
Yeah.
So what, of all the places to sit in the middle?
So yeah, that completely trumps where we saw the films.
But imagine seeing The Evil Dead in a drive-in.
Yeah, well,
I'd love to have seen that.
No, that's the dream. We enjoyed the movie, of course, so much that we didn't even stay for the second feature, Extra.
Oh, Zetro.
Interestingly, Zetro.
So,
Extra?
You say Extra, I say Zetro, but yeah, people have said, can you do an Extra?
That's very interesting because we've got an episode coming up in the future that has Extra on it. On the way home, I said we should divert over to the creepy graveyard a few miles from my house. To get there, you had to drive along the edge of a cornfield. Then after arriving and parking, you had to walk over a wooden footbridge across a creek bed about 6 feet down. I drove us there, our first visit, in the depths of the dark and the boonies. My headlights are shining across the creek bed, leaving it pitch black and super scary. We sat there with the car running for a couple of minutes. Finally I said, are you getting out and walking over there? And are you? I put the car in reverse and we left.
Who wouldn't do that? There's no way I'd have got out and fucking walked
No
over there.
fucking way. John F.
I'd love to have seen fucking Evil Dead in a drive-in. That's the way.
I think I'd like to have seen most of the films of my childhood, the horror films in driving.
Yeah.
John F. Army of Darkness is better than Evil Dead 1. Discuss.
I love Army of Darkness.
Army of Darkness, well, I've not seen Army of Darkness for a long time, but Army of Darkness has some amazingly good gags.
Yeah, that's what I mean. It's a flat-out comedy, and I remember loving it.
I would happily revisit the third.
I think my favourite of the series is probably 3, all told, if I'm being completely honest.
No, I can't. I need to see Evil Dead 3 again. I've not seen it. I've only seen it a couple of times. I've not seen it as much as the second one.
It's basically.
But I remember thinking
it's a kids' film. It's not really related in any way to the first two.
But doesn't it go on a bit too long?
I mean, yeah.
I remember it going on too long.
You know what? The more I think about it, if I watched it now, I'd probably think it was dog shit. But as soon as I heard that question, I was like, okay.
If we do 1 to 3, I'm going to say 3, but I can't say 3 over 2. Okay, Maurice. I recall totally falling for the Evil Dead 2 marketing campaign as a kid and assumed it was one of the scariest films ever made, only to find when I eventually settled down to watch it that was in fact one of the funniest comedies of all time. Just one of the many horror VHS cases I scared the shit out of myself over in the local video shop of my youth. Another classic was the 80s remake of The Blob. The images of the partially melted victims used to reduce me to tears, but I couldn't resist. John Denton. Evil 2 was briefly one of my all-time favourites. Like many people who were teenagers when it came out, I'd wrongly assumed it was some horrendously scary horror, and finally braved myself to hire it out when I was 18. What ensued was a true marvel, a genre I didn't even know existed, horror comedy. It is a pastiche without falling into the common modern day trap of tedious parody, and despite playing most scenes for laughs, it's still perfectly capable of shitting you up when it needs to. Bruce Campbell quite rightly made a career of this performance, and his Ash is an archetype that has informed heroes in both cinema and video games ever since. Also, it's definitely better than Army of Darkness, although original Evil Dead is not far off. Drag Me to Hell is Raimi's best horror though, real talk.
That's an interesting point.
Drag Me to Hell is a lot of fun.
I agree. I mean, I love that film.
I need to see it, but I need to see it. I can't sit here and go Evil Dead 2 is better than Drag Me to Hell, or Drag Me to or vice versa. Drag Me to Hell is better than Evil Dead 2.
Vice versa, starring Judge Reinhold and Fred Savage.
I love
rubbish.
Judge Reinhold. If anybody out there listening compare Drag Me to Hell with something else, then I would be more than happy to watch Drag Me to Hell again. So, that wraps everything up. Thank you so much for listening. You can catch us on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube. iTunes reviews really help. Until next time, God bless.
See you later.
Cult Film Face-Off.